the controversy of the day happens to be on one of the days that we stream. So I guess we could start with that.
Yeah, I didn't even hear. I saw somebody, a game developer that I follow, mention it, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. I am working, and I'll look at it later.
Yeah. So some of the takes are reasonable. I do believe, to some degree, this is something worth complaining about. I'm not in the face about that. And what we'll talk about more when we actually get into the details. But I'm also going to prime you that some of the takes are fucking retarded. And part of it is some people can't read, and some people just can't do math, or a combination of the two. And again, it's worth complaining about. This isn't necessarily a good thing or even a reasonable thing on the developer side, but it doesn't help when you're making the complaints far worse than what's actually happening. So we'll get into it. Let me pull it up. And here we go. Unity is introducing...
I'll just say, I just wanted to say, I've been railing against Unity for a while for other reasons, just because I find it to be not a great, just the way that it does the, I don't know what you call them, triggers or flags.
It's a very bloaty engine.
Yeah, it's been that way for a while.
And it's a fine resource, or at least it used to be, but it was a fine resource for somebody starting out who wanted something that they could just download for free and start learning. It is one of the big two engines that people use. You've got huge games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail on Unity. I'm trying to think of some of the other big games that were mentioned. Apparently, the Diamond and Pearl remakes for Pokemon, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, were made in Unity since a third-party company handled that. There's some big games made in it. You can do some wonderful things with Unity. It's a very bloated system. And then Unreal comes around, and they give you kind of an equal but better option at the same level, to where it's like, oh yeah, we're not going to start charging you until you reach a certain threshold, which is what Unity started doing. So they're kind of on the same playing field now. And why would you want to learn Unity over Unreal? Unity's easier to learn? Technically, yes. Does it have more assets that you can just get from them? Also, yes. But Unreal's a better engine and will just be a better investment over the long run to just learn how to use it.
I saw some people like in Reddit saying, well, Unity's the only option for mobile development. I'm like, no, you can use it. It's not even close.
Yeah, there's tons of things.
There's a ton of them.
Game Maker works for
almost. Yeah, I think there's still like Fusion. I think was originally used for Five Nights at Freddy's for the longest time. I don't know if they still use that or not.
You can even export Microsoft MXL to mobile. Like I said, Unreal, equally an option. They have a mobile export option in the engine. Octopath Traveler, Champions of the Continent, the mobile game that was made to function as close to the console games as possible, was also made in Unreal, just like the other versions of the game. Unity introduces a new developer fee based on the number of installs, which I had to read further because that title didn't make as much sense to me at first. Because I'm looking at it from like the engine side, I'm like, oh, I thought this was completely reasonable just on the headline. And like, okay, you're talking about how big your company is. That's what I thought. I was wrong. Because I'm like, if your company's huge, that would make sense to start putting a fee on installs. Like, if you have 100 plus employees, you're not an indie company. If you need 100 installs of the engine, I could see why you would start charging people. I was completely in the wrong zone whatsoever. This was about installs of the actual published games that used Unity. And then I started to understand why people are mad. So, the actual details, or how it's going to work, is it's still going to have the kind of like minimum threshold for like monetization, right? If you want to be in the what they call the personal or plus section, as long as you're making under $200,000 in the last 12 months, you're still not getting charged. This install base doesn't even kick in until after you hit that part, right? So the next part is
that how it works? It has to be both?
Yes, it does say and.
Okay.
In this case, right? And then it has to be installed at least 200,000 times in its whole lifetime, which is probably a pretty good like break system on the back end, because if somebody's only making $200,000 a year, they're probably making enough that they should still owe you money, but you would be falling, or not like $199,999. Like you're just shy of whatever the threshold is. They should probably still be owing you some money because they're making a lot of money in their lifetime. But your previous thing wouldn't cover that.
And it's not like when they make $200,000 and $1, suddenly they owe some big amount.
No, it's everything after the threshold too.
Yeah, there's a per install rate after that. Yeah,
which was what I was getting at with talking about some of these people can't read that we're complaining about this, and can't do math. So as long as you stay under that, you can even make that much because of microtransactions and only have like 10,000 people who ever installed your game, and you're kind of fine as an indie developer. This is mostly to target larger developers, but in the current climate, this will hit some small developers as it is, right?
Now, the question is, if someone installs the game and then uninstalls it, does that still count towards the install threshold?
I really don't know how they check this. Right? Obviously, there's a certificate.
Yeah.
And maybe the certificate maps your device's MAC like address or whatever, or some type of number, some serial, some motherboard number, something, so that it knows it's the same device.
Yeah, what if you install it on two different devices? Does that count as two?
Yeah, I would think two different devices would be separate installs.
Okay.
Because unless you're running it through Steam, I don't know. I'm not sure what they're doing for like their like checksum or whatever going on in the background to figure out how an install counts as an install.
And what if you get a new phone, because the iPhone 15 is coming out, and you what do you call it? You transfer all your stuff onto the new phone. Does everything technically gets reinstalled? Does that count?
I don't know. Because maybe they'll just use like your Apple Store or Google Play account as the check for the install on the mobile version. But the problem is, because we're talking about indie games, a lot of this doesn't necessarily go through stores. You can, on Google, like Apple or Android, not Apple, and Android devices, you can just get an APK and install it directly. Or you can go to a developer site on PC and you could just install it directly. You don't have to go through Steam or any of these other services to check the owner of it. So how do you qualify installs?
So I'm reading an article on GameSpot that says that uninstalling and reinstalling the game will count as a separate install.
Oh my God. So they're not even using any like physical serial of your motherboard or anything to check it. It's just installing the game pings the service.
Yeah. And
that's fucked.
Obviously, it does say reinstalling it on two different systems would count as two.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like they should. Almost feels like it would have to be more of an honor system. I mean, I know that would have problems, but because you can tell in your analytics if you're on the Apple or the Google store, you can tell how many people like currently have it installed as far as Apple and Google now. But you'd have to report that. I mean, obviously they're doing some sort of thing to report it to themselves, which is possibly one of the things people are upset about.
So we do have a chart of what the thresholds are. So for the revenue threshold, because again, you have to meet both, even if you had that many installs, but you just weren't meeting the revenue, you still don't get punished for it, as far as I can tell from everything that Unity's dropped so far. The personal and Unity Plus is 200,000. Once you break 1 million in the per year, you have you're in the Pro and Enterprise. Which, if you're making 1 million, fuck, you can afford to throw some money, right? And it's the same numbers for installs to date. It's 200,000 and a million lifetime installs. So that's not really the problem. Like, I don't really have a problem with what their thresholds are. It's when you start looking at how much they want per install, especially when some of these games are low, right? Like, one of the reasons you might be using Unity is to keep the cost of your game low. Not everybody's selling $60 games out there like Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Some people are trying to sell games at like $5 because they can get a lot of money off of a lot of people and it covers costs. So what they want is they have initial values over install. If you are on personal or plus, it never raises. So if you are 1 over the 200,000 install value, or if you're 1 million plus, it's still the flat 20 cents per install, which isn't that good,
is actually,
because everybody else goes down as it gets higher.
What's interesting is that Unity Pro, I mean, I guess it's per seat, so it depends on how many developers you are. But if you only have one developer, it's $2,000 a year. Yeah. So it makes sense to go to Pro as soon as you hit 10,000 installs over the threshold.
Yeah.
So if you get to 210, or 20 if you've got 2 developers, or 30 or 40, however, I don't even know why they don't. I mean, I guess. Yeah,
see, because I would have the opposite.
Way early on, you're going to switch to Pro.
Right. Yeah. I, that's probably why they want it. They want you to switch to Pro. Right. But you'd be thinking, if you want people to jump on your thing, I would actually probably put a smaller monthly rate, or like diminishing return on the personal than I would on the other ones. Especially because if you're hitting that 1 million plus install rate, you're probably already making so much money that you have to be Pro or Enterprise anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is that, like, basically what they're trying to do, I mean, just looking at this,
they're trying to push people to actually buy Pro or Enterprise.
Yeah. If you've got personal or plus and you get over that 200,000, you just immediately, you should just go to Pro. There's
probably
absolutely no reason not to.
I would agree
at that point. Yeah.
And that's why they're punishing smaller creators instead of helping them. I don't know how well that will work for them, because we could take this away, and I think
sort of
with the returns that you get, and also that $1 million month to date was always there, so you had to upgrade to Pro anyway. I don't think you needed to add this to get people to upgrade to Pro. People who are hitting in that direction, like they've already gone over $200,000 and they're heading towards that million, were probably already considering upgrading to Pro anyway, just so they could continue making their game better, get more revenue from it. I would not be surprised if part of this was because of how well certain phone games are doing, including the MiHoYo games.
Yeah. Well, and here's a question. So, like, they're saying this is a monthly rate. So you're actually paying. So if you have, say, 100,000 over the threshold, you're going to be paying as a personal or plus $20,000 a month.
Yes.
To Unity.
Yeah, that's where the good complaints come from.
Like, what if your game doesn't have a monthly revenue?
Yeah.
Right. That's a problem. It's definitely going to encourage in-app purchases and
for sure
microtransactions. Yeah.
And like, instead of a monthly rate,
the...
right? Like, what if you're a single purchase game? They should just have an option for like almost like a tax instead. It's like, hey, we just get this much of the game purchase. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, that seems fair. That's what most publishers do.
I think that's what they used to do before this.
Yeah, but that's why I think like specifically like Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, right? Who are games as a service, and a lot of the big games now that would qualify in the enterprise section here are games as a service, right? Where they might be making millions of dollars per month. They want to dip into that. That's like the real thing.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, if you've got 100 or if you've got 1 million installs, basically, if you have 2 million at the enterprise level, you're paying 1 penny per install.
Yeah. So people are mad. I don't know. It's not just users. Obviously, devs are mad, as they should be, to some degree. And people are basically revolting. A lot of people are even like, you'll literally bankrupt us, which if you're in the middle ground, that might be the case. Like, you'd have to be in a very, very specific window to get bankrupted from this. And that might also be your company's problem if you're putting yourself in the situation where you could get bankrupt by something like this.
Yeah. The problem is, what appears, at least what I read somewhere on Reddit or something, is that the thresholds count for it's basically retroactive. So I guess they've already been counting, right? So if you hit the 200,000 install, if you've already hit that, then you're already going to be charged. But I think that the rate is based on the installs from whenever this starts forward. That's what it seemed like. Like, they're not going to ask for you to pay.
Oh, no, they're not going to make you do back pay.
Retroactively.
It's like, it's going to count all of those installs, but it's just going to start on this month, right? So it's still going to be the month by month rate.
Okay.
You just don't have to pay for previous months.
Okay, so if you've already got 300,000, you're immediately paying for 100,000 of that whenever this starts per month. It doesn't make sense unless you've got in-app purchases and monthly.
Well, it's also why a lot of developers are trying to look for ways to quickly port their games over to other engines, just seeing this. And if you're a small game, go ahead and do that, right? Unreal is not looking like it's going to fuck you over. They're not charging a single thing until you hit like 1 million last I checked. It's not that hard to learn. A lot of what you did in Unity can even just be carried over to that. They speak the same languages. You're just going to have to figure out what to do differently with the application and engine itself. But take the time to do that, and then you won't have to worry about Unity again. You could just report your game. I believe the app stores even let you update it. You just would have to make people reinstall it fresh.
I just don't... Really? No, well, not necessarily.
Well, no, so the update would basically delete all the old information and put the new one in, because that's how the APK works.
There may be, but there may be a way to port it so that it just ends up being an update.
Maybe for some games. I don't know if how that would work for everything, but it's possible.
Yeah, that's weird. Like, all of a sudden, like, say you've got 500,000 installs, all of a sudden you're paying, all of a sudden you owe them $100,000 a month.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Yeah, that would make you go bankrupt.
Yeah, can MiHoYo cover that at what their rate is? Yeah, sure. They could. They don't even, they piss that money out, right? But can like your average middle tier game dev afford that out of nowhere? No.
I mean, like I said,
a
lot of them are just going to have to say, okay, we're going to have to pay for Pro now.
Yeah.
And if they've got 5 developers.
Right.
Yeah. But if they've got 5 developers, at least then they're only paying $10,000 a month instead of, what did I say? 100,000 potentially. Yeah. But maybe they can't afford 10,000. I don't know.
Maybe they can't. Especially, like, again, if they don't have in-app purchases, right? and this game's been going for a while. Maybe they might still update it, right? So there's still people freshly installing, playing the game. But, like, they could have spent most of that money on the next game that they plan to make, right? So they just don't have that capital to pay back.
Yeah, what if you've got a game out there that's had several 100,000 installs and it's just not popular anymore? It's not being updated anymore.
Well, again,
or it's not being,
that's why the other threshold, the other check, is how much money have you made in the last 12 months, right? So that's what people are forgetting. It is both checks, right?
Yeah.
So it is bad, but it's not as bad as people are trying to make it out to be. That's why we need to talk about what the actual problems are here.
Yeah.
So if you don't have microtransactions,
I feel like the revenue threshold should be higher.
It probably should. They shouldn't be even. But, like, again, if you don't have microtransactions, you actually could be safe. Because, especially if your game is, like, half a decade old, and it was, like, a one-time purchase, you probably didn't make that much money in the last 12 months. That game is probably just done with what it got, except for trickle of new fans who never heard of it.
Yeah. You got to remember that threshold there. That's important.
That's why people need to learn to read.
and don't forget the things that you read a few minutes ago. I totally forgot that, and I was like, well, wait a minute.
Well, that's why I also made a point to really emphasize that before we started on this conversation of everything else, is that the original threshold for both installs, for money per year was still there. They did not change that part.
Yeah.
The other thing, people can't do math. So as you even brought up, everybody's like showing their math on Twitter because Unity was trending on Twitter. You could go and you could find everybody complaining about it. A lot of their math involved them counting all of the money and they ever made and installs, and not realizing that it only counted everything that happened after the threshold. Right. So they were counting like, I have 400,000 installs. Let me do the math on that. It's like, well, you have to cut that in half because the first 200,000 aren't being cut against you.
Yeah. It's too complicated.
It is. But you know who it's not too complicated for? Whatever Excel sheet algorithm that Unity already has whipped up that they can plug and play your numbers in, and they can send you exactly how much you owe them.
Right. That's true. But all of this combined, it's like, if you install the game on multiple devices, you don't pay the developer for every device. And like they said, if somebody gets mad at a developer, get 1,000 people to install and uninstall a game over and over again.
Yeah. But even Unity came out and said, which again, they have every reason to say this, so take whatever they say with a grain of salt. But it says that these fees won't apply to most of its developers.
Yeah.
And when they say most, I guarantee they mean at least over half, right? Maybe even to the vast majority if they're small developers. And it's because I don't believe most of their developers make over $200,000 every single year. So it doesn't even matter how many installs they get, especially if it's a free-to-play game. If they're only making like $10,000 a year, they could get like 2 million installs and it's not going to matter.
True. Very true.
So it's not the end of the world.
No.
Yeah. In fact, it only really, like I said, I only think it negatively affects what I would consider middle-tier developers. People who have been mildly successful, are making new games, and maybe they, before this was thrown out, they threw a lot of their revenue towards the next game that they're making or whatever. So having to pay something like this monthly out of pocket may not really be feasible, right? Maybe they'll have to take out a business loan or whatever. Or I think what better is just switch platforms. Go report your game to something else or whatever if you don't want to deal with it. If you're doing fine enough that you can just upgrade to the Pro, just do that as well. You've got options there depending on what your financial situation is. But you're the only ones that are really getting hit. It's not going to hit the higher end that much. It just means that Unity's going to be making more money off of people that they probably rightfully should be making more money on, and it's not going to hurt the lowest end of people at all.
Yeah, but even the high end people have got to look at this and be like, okay,
Unreal.
Let's do some calculations here. Yeah, let's for how do I keep thinking of the wrong word? It's not hentai. It's Genshin Impact.
Honkai. Yeah.
Honkai, yeah. They're going to have to do some calculations and be like, okay, what's it going to cost us? What's this going to cost us versus switching? Now,
because it's pennies on the dollar for them, but it might be worth them keeping because they obviously already have enterprise and their people are just used to it. I think it would have to be a pretty heavy hit for them to want to switch platforms.
Yeah, but the question is, how many installs have there been? So I
ton.
don't know what that calculation is going to be. But what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, so number one, Unity also said that you can get discounts from all of this by using their services, would probably cost money. Because they offer like back end, storage, database, probably. They usually offer I think they offer like basically like in-game currency sort of management stuff that you can do. All kinds of services that you can add to your games. Plus, I'm guessing that if like a company like MiHoYo came to them and been like, 1 penny is kind of too much, they'd probably be like, how about we cut that in half just for you?
Also, they're probably not going to be charged that much anyway if you talk about the discounts, because I guarantee you places like MiHoYo and stuff are using a lot of their back-end services.
Yeah. That is one big advantage. I mean, a lot of engines have that kind of stuff, but I'm pretty sure Unity's is pretty mature and they can handle all the back end, in-app purchases.
For that, they actually might be better than Unreal, and that might also be one reason why people choose them, because they've been doing that longer than Epic has.
Right. Yeah, that was one thing. Titanium, which is the sort of underlying engine that Platino ran on, started to offer those kinds of back-end services for, so that you wouldn't have to roll your own database and your own APIs and all that junk in the background. And then they went out of business anyway. So
yeah,
but yeah, I'm familiar with it, sort of the back-end APIs that are useful for games you don't really want to do yourself, reinvent the wheel.
Which again, I widely agree with the panic. It's just that most of it's overblown because people can't read or do math.
Yeah. Yeah, and they may adjust it. If I were to make a suggestion to Unity, it would be just adjust that revenue threshold, or somehow account for apps without recurring fees.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they're using their backend service for it, they'd be able to tell if an app has recurring fees or not.
Yeah. And just be like, okay, 20 cents per install isn't that bad if it's a one-time cost.
Yeah.
Or if you can tell that if the revenue threshold was about 5 times bigger than it is or something.
Yeah, because what's the thing? If the threshold is per year, let's say you had a one-time cost game, right? And they're doing it the way that it is now. We're trying to get off the subject, but now my brain is thinking, right?
Yeah.
Right. And you did it one time, and you made over the threshold that you needed to, both. Like, enough people installed it, and you made enough money that year. Are you going to be paying that rate for that whole 12 months until it lapsed that you didn't cross that threshold again?
Yeah.
That's what it sounds
like. Plus, it occurs to me that you could end up like we were talking about, how if you get above the install threshold, it's 20 cents per install after that. But if you get above the revenue threshold, you could be going from 0 to, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars all of a sudden.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden your 12-month you were making 190, and then all of a sudden you make 200,000, then they're going to start looking at how many installs you got, and it's like, I just got a bill for $15,000 or something.
Yeah. Because I believe the way it works too is that regardless of this new install thing, the former thing about how you had the revenue threshold where you had to upgrade to Pro or Enterprise is still there. So no matter what, even if your install base was low, they're still getting some money from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
just not getting the whole install thing. Yeah.
It should really be based. I mean, the per install thing is so stupid.
It is.
It should be based on your revenue. Like, I guess they can't track that, but like, it really should be based on your revenue.
Like, yeah, well, they could easily track installs though, because they get the ping for certificates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you make $5 because somebody bought it, that should be, you should pay a one-time fee on that $5 and that's it.
Oh yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Okay.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I don't really have much other than that. We'll probably get updates on it too. We'll probably cover this story again in a week from now or whatever. Whenever there's more that comes out.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take effect until January 1st, so they've got plenty of time to think about what they've done.
Walk some things back.
Change their minds, yeah.
Get spaghetti sauce on my desk.
Exactly.